Home isn't just a place, it's a feeling. Whether you're at home, your business, or online, ADT helps keep you safe. With security systems, home automation, alarms, and surveillance, so you can feel at home wherever you are. Go to ADT.com to get that feeling. ADT, home, safe home.
Dwayne Wade is a free agent. Carmelo Anthony traded over the weekend. Fabulous, furious finishes to the early games yesterday, the best we've seen in the NFL in 2 years, but these, of course, are not normal circumstances, and you don't need us to explain the reasons why. We've been talking all morning long, trying to find a balance in our conversation between the action that has taken place on the field, and we need to get into some of the action that took place in boardrooms, trade rooms, conference calls, wherever it is these deals get done in the NBA yesterday, and then, of course, all the events surrounding the President of the United States and his words about the world of sports, both football and basketball. Jalen Rose is here to provide insight into all of that and much more. Good morning, Jalen.
Morning, gentlemen.
So you have to provide insight, he said.
Absolutely. Got to give the people what they want.
Right.
That's the goal. Jalen, a newly minted member of the State of Michigan's Hall of Fame.
That's pretty impressive.
That on Twitter.
Yes,
Congratulations.
Appreciate the love.
Nice job. Nice job out of you.
That's for the work that you've done with your school there as much as it is anything else. Okay, let's start with some of the basketball because we haven't done it at all this morning, and so let's get a little insight into that, and then we'll work our way towards other matters. Let's start with Carmelo Anthony because it feels like we waited forever for that trade to take place, and then considering all of the other circumstances that were going on Saturday when the president was tweeting at the Warriors that they were uninvited to the White House, it almost became as though the trade of a future Hall of Famer became like secondary news, and for understandable reasons. But as we look at all the circumstances here, Carmelo on Oklahoma City, you put him together with George and with Russell Westbrook. Where in your mind does that put the Thunder right now in the pecking order in the NBA's Western Conference?
With Russell Westbrook averaging a triple-double and winning MVP, the Oklahoma City Thunder, though recently they lost KD and obviously they lost James Harden, were still a playoff team. But once they got there, they were clearly overmatched because he didn't have the supporting cast to take them to the next level. Adding these two players and still keeping the base of their roster in tow, in particular Adams, I think they're a top 4 team in the Western Conference. I truly do. Paul George is going to have a lot to prove because while in Indiana he became an all-star player, played at an all-NBA level. It's going to be his second year off a horrific injury that he's overcome. I think that team is going to be so exciting to watch. How about Sam Presti, their general manager?
Yeah.
How he continues to remix his roster, overcome adversity, ignore what Kevin Durant had to say on his burner Twitter account, and still find ways to make mega deals happen and bringing Carmelo Anthony to town is just that.
The other side of that, as I look at it, you see Kyrie going to Boston. Mm-hmm. You know, what went on there? Then you see Chris Paul, obviously, to Houston, and George to Oklahoma City now where Carmelo goes, and then Dwayne Wade. All that being said, the one constant, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we can change is, but Golden State's still the best team, and nobody, while they look better to beat them, is going to beat them. So it almost seems like while most of this movement, we were like, wow, look at this future Hall of Famer moving here, and this star moving here, and this guy moving here. Where are we? Cleveland, Golden State, back in the finals again. Would you agree?
I agree, but the NBA is on fire right now.
I agree with that.
And if they were at a stoplight with the NFL, the NBA pulled off in a Lamborghini while the NFL is driving a minivan. Like, the NBA is that deal. And I agree with you, Golic. While the Golden State Warriors, when they have 4 All-Stars on their team, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, and Klay Thompson are the favorites, the Cleveland Cavaliers still have LeBron James and basically a retooled roster that's going to make them the class of the Eastern Conference. Man, the league still has intrigue, though. When you have the remote control in your hand, it's like, wow, Boston has Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward. Houston has CP3 and James Harden. We just talked about the deal that Oklahoma City was able to capture. There's so much intrigue going on in the league. It's going to be fantastic to watch.
Is the other, again, with that, because I agree with you, completely agree with you, but what about also, don't you almost expect next year Chris Paul will be on another team. Paul George will be on another team. Maybe Carmelo, maybe even LeBron, way everybody's talking that the whole thing's going to rearrange again.
It could, but as you guys know, sports truly happens in dog years. There's so many things that can take place over the next 12 months that it's hard to quantify what truly will take place. And there's still a part of me, while I was one of the first people to come out and not only talk about Cantor going to the Knicks, but also talk about LeBron possibly leaving Cleveland. That's not necessarily a foregone conclusion because I don't know if he wants those Western Conference problems. If you truly look at what's taking place in the West from top to bottom, it's a gauntlet to get out of there. He's owned the Eastern Conference 7 straight years. So worst case scenario, he knows that he's going to get to the conference finals, maybe the NBA finals, and at that point anything can happen when you're the best player in the game.
All right, so I want to go back to the first thing you said, which is this makes OKC a top 4 team in the Western Conference. If they can defend, I'm not sure it doesn't make them the second best team in the Western Conference. I mean, Westbrook, I believe, regardless of what anybody's record was, when KD was there, they were the second best team in the conference. They had the best chance to beat Golden State, and they had them on the ropes, as has been covered a million times, 3-1 up in that series and didn't get it done, and KD goes. I understand you're putting Houston and San Antonio, obviously, are the 2 teams you're talking about ahead of them right now. And I know Houston, with the way they play and adding Chris Paul, which I think will be a nice addition. But if you've got George on the perimeter right now to go around. No one stops Kevin Durant, but someone out there who plays as good a defense out there with his size and his length and everything else as he does. Carmelo is another place to go get buckets anytime you want them. And Westbrook is Westbrook. If they maybe a little tinkering here or there, they continue to put stuff around. They got the big in the middle. I think if you're looking at one of those teams and say, which one of them would you give up the best puncher's chance against Golden State in a 7-game series, I think I would take Oklahoma City.
I'm rolling with you. Based on the balance you just talked about, Houston still has to figure out what they're going to do at the power forward and center position consistently to get production and, more importantly, defense once the playoffs come. San Antonio Spurs, they have Kawhi Leonard and Coach Pop. Those are 2 things we know that they're going to get 50 to 55 wins just waking up in the morning.
Right.
Now, once they get to the playoffs, is LaMarcus Aldridge and whoever else that plays up front going to consistently get them productivity? But I totally agree with you and appreciate how OKC has continued to reinvent itself, and now all of a sudden they're a contending type team. And I appreciate that level of balance, though the Golden State Warriors and the Cavs have become outliers in their conference that we now have in the NBA.
Okay, let's go back to something that's really important there. I don't care if Oklahoma City finishes second because Golden State's still the cream of the crop there, and they're going to win. You said you don't think it's a foregone conclusion now LeBron is leaving Cleveland. I've been saying this forever now, that why would he go to the West? The whole notion of him playing with his banana boat friends just so he can play with his banana boat friends. Last I checked, he likes the history, and he likes the fact he's going to the finals every single year. Why would he leave Cleveland?
And also, if you're LeBron James, you got to look at it like this. The Cleveland Cavaliers have a squad. I think what gets lost is we want to dumb down the journey and talk about the fast forward to the finals, and people haven't truly looked at the Cleveland Cavaliers roster. They just added Isaiah Thomas. When he comes back from a hip injury, for those who haven't been paying attention, he almost averaged 30 points last year.
Yeah.
Okay, they still have JR at the shooting guard position, a knockdown 3-point shooter. They still re-signed Kyle Korver. They have Tristan inside. They brought along Derrick Rose. They still have Kevin Love, who gets overlooked in this entire dynamic. I think he's going to be close to an 18-11 guy this season. So when you put that with LeBron James and you have all of the things he has going for himself, why give that up unless you're going to be on a super team? So if LeBron leaves, this is what you pay attention to. Where's the next super team? Mm-hmm. Is an all-star level player, like you mentioned, that isn't long-term with this team, now going to go to a team, say the Los Angeles Lakers? You said Paul George. Russell Westbrook hasn't signed. What's going to happen with DeMarcus Cousins? If these players now shake loose to one of those teams, then follow the tea leaves and LeBron possibly ends up there. But if he's not playing for a super team, he's not bouncing.
Couple of quick thoughts on that. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Jalen Rose is with us, our guest on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. We'll get to a million other things coming up. But you mentioned Sam Presti, the job he's done in Oklahoma City. You look at the trades of big stars and all the different things that have happened. He has managed to turn in the last month or whatever it was, 6 weeks. He has managed to turn Doug McDermott, Enes Kanter, Victor Oladipo, and Arvydas Sabonis' son into Paul George and Carmelo Anthony. Okay? That's what he did. So that is remarkable what he's done in OKC. If they're hanging on by a thread, he's not going down without a fight. So I give him all the credit in the world. The other piece in this is, oh, by the way, Dwayne Wade is a free agent now. For those of you waking up this morning and hadn't heard the news, Wade works out a buyout with the Bulls. He leaves $8 million on the table, and he goes where he wants. Does he go to Cleveland and play with his longtime good friend LeBron? Does he go to Oklahoma City? Could Dwayne Wade at this stage, at 35 years old, with all the moxie and the savvy and the skill he still has, could he be one who could tilt the bounds of power a little bit in the West based upon where he goes?
Any contending team would want Dwayne Wade on their roster, a three-time champion. As you noted, it was a foregone conclusion that he was going to get bought out by the Chicago Bulls because they're going in different directions at this point. But the one thing no one isn't discussing is that all of the teams you just described, if he signs with those squads, he's going to be a substitute. He won't be a starter anymore. And so you have to look at when he goes to a squad, if he's now going to be that boost off the bench that they really need. He could provide that in OKC, which on paper, I would like him to go there just because it's more sexy when you cover in the game. But the reality of it is he'll be in Cleveland with his good friend LeBron James. And how things come full circle, LeBron actually left Miami, looked at Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh and said, you know what? Our time of winning championships are probably ended, so I'm going to go to Cleveland and play with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love. Now come full circle, Dwayne Wade does, in my opinion, join the Cleveland Cavaliers.
How does a player deal with that? A guy who's been a star, a Hall of Famer, starter his whole career, and all of a sudden say you're relegated to coming off the bench and we need you to be that spark? How does that happen?
Longevity comes with reinventing yourself. Look at an artist like Jay-Z or Puffy or players that played a long time in whatever sport or career endeavor. You have to humble yourself, accept a different role, but also be real that you can still be productive at what you're being asked to do and not allow your ego to say, I'm only going to go to a team that makes me a starter. Especially at this point of his career, you don't want to put those miles on your body. You still want to be fairly fresh once the playoffs come. And he understands getting bought out by the Bulls gives him a new lease on life. And I think that ends up being a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers.
All right, we are Mike and Mike, and Jalen Rose is here in our studio. He is giving us the Straight Talk, which is brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best networks, no contracts. I don't remember exactly what day you said it, but I remember when you said it. Some months ago. I believe it was shortly after the inauguration of President Trump, but I don't recall exactly when you said it.
I'll tell you when I said.
When did you say it?
NBA and NFL players will deny the opportunity to attend the White House under the Trump presidency. And I took a lot of crap for it. And you guys know how this industry works. Sometimes it's good when you're breaking news and you become a headline, and sometimes it isn't. And that was one of those days where people was questioning what I had to say about the topic. It was November of 2016 when I said it. Now you fast forward, it's actually happening right in front of us.
And then, so fast forward to this past Saturday.
Yes.
And I can't find the tweet now. I'm going through it and through his Twitter feed because there's a million things that he tweeted about, and a lot of them about the flag, and then there's North Korea here and Little Rocket Man and all sorts of other things. And where is the one about Steph Curry? Excuse me, I should have had this ready to go here. Here it is. Donald J. Trump tweeted, going to the White House is considered a great honor for a championship team. Stephen Curry is hesitating, therefore invitation is withdrawn. That was a big part of the discussion of this weekend. So this is after Steph Curry had said on the jump on Friday, because the Warriors were going to have a meeting on Saturday morning to discuss as a team what they might do. I know Adam Silver said he was hoping the team would go to try and have a conversation. That all gets headed off at the pass, if you will, by the president and what he tweeted. So with that as the backdrop, and I just wanted to set it up with you having predicted months ago this was going to become an issue. What is your perspective on all that we saw happen this weekend between the president, the NBA, and the NFL?
So I want to make sure I set the table by saying, I'm not disrespecting the office of the presidency. I'm just going to talk about the behavior of the individual that's the 45th president, and I agree with you. It's actually 44 people that's held that office that sits in that chair. I knew that this would take place because when you run a divisive campaign the way he did, and on the way in here, I wanted to make sure I made a note of multiple people that he actually insulted along the way. The disabled. He mocked a reporter with a disability. Muslims, blacks, Asians, women, POWs. i.e. John McCain, he's not a hero. He got captured. Okay, whatever. His competitors came up with cute nicknames for everyone. Crooked Hillary, Lion Ted, Rocket Man, as you just mentioned. And I don't want to be a dotard here. You like that one? Mm-hmm. Mexicans. And so when you run a divisive campaign and you don't win the popular vote, yet you still hold the office of president, there will be people that have an adverse response to it. And so the unique thing about being an NBA player and or an NFL player, predominantly black sports for whatever it's worth, unlike NASCAR, who he tweeted about his appreciation for that, but we all know the dichotomy in that scenario. All of a sudden, you have NBA players saying, we don't want to stay at Trump-branded hotels. And again, I'm going to make sure I acknowledge, this isn't personal. I've actually gone to a boxing match with Tom Brady and Donald Trump in New Jersey, Antonio Tarver, Roy Jones Jr. I've stayed at Trump-branded hotels. I lived in Trump Tower when I played for the New York Knicks for 25 games. So this isn't personal in any way, shape, or form. But now when you fast forward that behavior, NBA players have a level of power and say, you know what? We're going to balk back at your behavior. And so instead of extending the invite because he knew it was going to get denied, he tried to reverse engineer the situation and say, you're uninvited. Well, you can't uninvite somebody that didn't want to come anyway. And we're going to continue to see this happen in the NBA, in the NFL, because those players in those sports have the power, they have the voice, they have the strength to show the public that sports can be a uniting factor, because they say if you don't want to offend people, don't talk about religion and or politics. Well, it's just the opposite in sports. This is a place where you could go to an arena. You could go to a stadium. There's a billionaire sitting there. There's the average working Joe, all rooting for the same squad. And so what he thought he was doing, dividing people through sports, he actually is going to unite. And all of those owners, are probably about 8 of them who are in the NFL, who were supporters of Trump, they have to be kicking themselves in the butt today. Because think about it. SOBs is what you call us, because we're trying to take our liberties and our choice to make a protest, a peaceful one at that, during the flag is just disrespectful, and it should be beneath the office of the president.
The part I didn't know fully, did the Golden State as a team say they weren't going to go, or was it just...
Again, they were having a meeting on... The plan was they were going to meet Saturday morning as their training camp opened and have a discussion about whether they were going to go or not.
Right.
Friday, Steph Curry went on The Jump with
Said
Rachel.
He wasn't going to go.
He didn't say that. He said he was inclined at this point not to go. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it was something to the effect of he was disinclined to go, but he was going to go to the meeting with an open mind. It was something to those lines. Now, Kevin Durant has made it very clear in comments multiple times that he didn't want any part of going prior to this. But they were, in theory, going to have a meeting on Saturday morning. Trump heard Steph Curry's comments and uninvited them before they had a chance to discuss whether they were going to go or not. I did see comments from the commissioner, from Adam Silver, saying that he personally is disappointed by this because he was hopeful that the team would go and hopefully be able to engage in some sort of discourse, God forbid, between people with opposing points of view, where someone like Steve Kerr, who has been a very vocal critic of the president, might go and say, look, this is what you are doing that is upsetting to us. Let me hear your perspective. I'm going to tell you mine. We'll sit down and have a conversation about it, rather than, oh, you're considering not coming here. All right, well, then you weren't invited in the first place. That's obviously not helping the situation.
No,
but to backtrack back to your question, that's where it all began.
Because my thought on this has always been, if you want to go to the White House as a team win the championship, go. If you don't go. I don't care, personally. I think there are a lot of people that if they want to go because it's the office. You know, not necessarily the guy who's in it, but the office. They get to go through the White House. They get to see, you get to see the history of it and enjoy that part of it. So I don't know where you stand on that. I mean, if a team wants to go, and whether it's a basketball team and a couple players don't want to go, or it's a football team and 10 players don't want to go, I don't care. I'm not living my life off of, oh, my God, that guy didn't go to the White House. It's not making me think anything differently. I have my own views. If you don't want to go to the White House with your team, that's not changing my views. I'm going to the White House because I want to go see the White House. It doesn't matter if I want to see that guy in the White House or not. I want to go to the White House. I want to go and enjoy all that comes with the White House. And if people don't want to go, I don't care. It really doesn't bug me one bit.
Yeah, we differ there, and that's what makes this a great conversation because I do care. And the reason why I care is because when you visit my house, that's an endorsement. And so once we take that picture, that's forever. It's almost like being a public figure. If somebody asks you to take a picture with them and they're doing something provocative or they happen to be, say, naked, you're not going to take that picture. Why? You don't want that visual out there. Mm-hmm. And so for me, if I was a member of the Golden State Warriors or any championship team, I would not want that visual. I would not visit the White House under this president.
I think that it has changed. I agree with you. There were times in my life where I would have felt differently, but I do think that we are now at a point in our society, for better or worse, and I think probably for worse, where there is more attached to the simple act of going. Look at all the golfers who have played golf with the president, which has happened a million times, and no one pays any attention to it.
And they heard about it.
It does become a very big deal.
And they still golfed.
Some of them did, but some of them now are choosing not to, or some of them are saying they regret they have because of the backlash.
I personally don't think teams are going to boycott completely anymore.
Well, the Penguins are going. The
Penguins are going,
and the Warriors are not.
So let me give this.
Well, the Warriors are uninvited. I think they were going to not go anyway.
Throw that one out. It sans the uninvitings, that may go out there. I still think there will be players from teams that go, and I really don't have an issue.
Jalen.
I think that's important for me again to make this distinction. There will be teams that go.
Right.
They just won't be NBA and NFL teams. That's the distinction I'm making, and they just so happen to be the predominantly black sports. I think Major League Baseball clubs, I think those that celebrate NASCAR or whatever other sport you want to throw into the mix, they still will pick and choose their opportunities to go. Those are the two sports that I'm standing on.
You don't think any NFL? I see. We'll disagree on that. And listen, we'll find out.
Well, of course, the Patriots are going to go. They just gave them a championship ring 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, which was why I thought Robert Kraft's statement was unique, was important. Was significant is the word I'm looking for here, because there has been no more visit, with the exception of Woody Johnson, who was currently the ambassador to the United Kingdom. There has been no more visible supporter of President Trump amongst the NFL owners than Kraft. The other thing, just quickly on that, is we've seen political statements made in not going to the White House before. Matt Burke, NFL player, didn't go to the White House when President Obama was in office because of his support for abortion rights.
Sure, this has been done
Craig
before.
Hodges was involved one time.
Now it's more en masse.
And once Craig Hodges did that, he was ostracized from the league.
Blackballed from the league.
Oh, just like Colin Kaepernick.
Correct.
Right.
Tim Thomas of the Bruins didn't go. So there is historical precedent for lack of a better word, the politicizing of a visit to the White House. I think we are at a time right now, for many people, I certainly not for all people, for many people, where it has gone beyond just being the honor of being invited to the White House, which it was for you and me when we went there.
Yes, absolutely.
But it has now become a little. I do believe that right now, for a lot of people, it has become different.
No,
I
believe it has. I don't think it's going to be boycotted. We're going to agree to disagree that it will be boycotted by teams en masse. I'm going because I'm going to steal a pen.
You're listening to Love Advice with Leanne. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, Leanne. Longtime listener, first-time caller. Why, in your professional opinion, do you never take my calls off the air?
Is this Carl?
Yep, it's Carl. I mean, we had a few dates. Everything was great. I thought,
Well, when you switch to Geico, you could save a lot of money on car insurance.
Okay, awesome.
You should call them.
I will.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
All right, there have been many times over 18 years where I've thought 4 hours in the morning was a lot of time to fill, and then there are days like today where it's just not nearly enough to get in all the conversation we would like to. Jalen Rose continues with us here, and Louis Riddick has joined us in our studio as well as we try and balance the things happening on the field with all of the bigger picture events that are taking place. And just to finish up the conversation we were having a few minutes ago about teams visiting and not visiting the White House, just through the things that have happened since Trump became president, Clemson went. The Patriots went. Quite a few players, including Tom Brady, did not go.
Right.
North Carolina, the basketball champions, just announced this weekend that they are not going. They say it was a scheduling conflict, not because of the president.
They said the same thing happened in 2005 when they gave like 8 or 9 dates and they couldn't work it out, so they didn't go in 2005 either.
The Warriors, I think we are safe to say, were likely not going to go, but they were meeting to discuss it for whatever that's worth. Steph Curry gave an interview to ESPN in which he said he was disinclined to go. The president saw that and disinvited them. So that just so we basically have the facts as we have them. And then where it goes from here remains to be seen. Jalen has had some really interesting thoughts on this. Mike and I certainly have all morning long. Louis, I'll give you the floor on wherever you want to go. You're a lifelong football man. You played football all through your life growing up and have been in and around the sport forever. We saw a day yesterday unlike any that we've ever seen before. What thoughts went through your mind?
Yeah, Greeny, I think I've said this a couple different times. And Golic, I heard you talk about it this morning. I heard Booger talk about it. And this is the thing that continues to strike me, and I've said this numerous different times. Right now, the whole conversation is centered around the form of protest that players are choosing to engage in, that Colin Kaepernick started. And the conversation continually, day after day after day, continues to veer away what the initial issue was. And it makes me think this. Look, I think every player in the National Football League who's kneeling right now, they weren't doing this a year ago, 2 years ago. Players in the National Football League understand the privilege that it is to live in this country, to play the sport that they do, to be able to take care of their families, and what it means to be an American. They understand that. There's a bigger issue that's involved here, though, right now. And I think what's troubling to me is that I think people purposely want to keep the conversation about the method of protest instead of about what the protest is supposed to be representing. And I think that's for one of two reasons in my mind. It's either because you don't care, because you don't think it affects you, or there's some other agenda that you've got going on. Either you think it's okay what's going on, what these guys are protesting about. Because otherwise you would be able to take your mind and advance it forward and say, hey, look, I don't agree with how you're protesting. I have family members in the military who have fought for the freedoms that we all benefit from, okay, who have been out there for a long time. If you cared about what the issues are that these guys really want to talk about, and I mean all of us want to talk about, and all of us are subject to, when you're talking about racial inequality and social injustices, if you really cared about that, you would go ahead and advance the conversation forward past the anthem protest and say, let's get at the crux of what the issue is here in America. But this has been something that's been going on for so long, Greeny. It went on for my mother. It went on for my grandmother, my great-great-grandmother. It's going on for us right now, and it's going on and it's going to go on for the foreseeable future. You know why? Because people don't want to talk about it. Because I don't think people, I think there's some people who don't know what to do. I think there's some people who don't care, and I think there's some people who like the way it is. And they're fine with it. Because you know what? What's good for me is what's good for me. That's what the world is like right now. If it's good for me and it doesn't affect me and I'm making my money and my life is good and my kids are taken care of, fine. Whatever you're dealing with, hey, you deal with. You deal with. This is not about the anthem for these players. The players are not trying to be disrespectful. They want to be heard, and they want to represent people who, right now, if it wasn't for the fact that the players were protesting, they'd never be heard, and things would stay the way that they are. And they've been this, and we know this, but we won't focus on what the issue really is. We will continue to, people will try to attack football players. Look, we know, we've been in locker rooms, man. There's people from all kinds of different socioeconomic backgrounds, different ethnicities, different religions. And when they get out on the football field, what they showed you yesterday was this. And obviously we've seen this from team to team. Not everybody agrees with how to protest here. But these guys are tremendously loyal to one another. They're brothers in arms, so to speak, on the football field. And they showed that yesterday that, hey, look, we may not all agree, but we find a way to somehow continue to have dialogue internally and trying to come to some kind of conclusion about how we should protest. But this is much bigger than that, and that's the thing that irritates me the most, is that we can't even get to the problems.
Well,
we can't get to the problems, and I don't think people want to get to the problems.
I agree with you. I said on a much, much, much smaller level, it's when Deflategate stopped being about the deflated football. It's when, and a bigger issue, it's when the Zeke Elliott stopped being about domestic violence and the procedure. We lose sight of what's going on. Let me ask you guys this. What if, instead of the tweets we heard from the president over the weekend, we saw this tweet instead? What will we think? Peaceful protests are a hallmark of our democracy. Even if I don't always agree, I recognize the rights of people to express their views. Sounds pretty good, right?
Yeah, I know where you're going, and it's...
You know who tweeted that? Yeah. January 22nd of this year, Donald Trump.
Yeah, those were during the Women's March.
He tweeted that out. I mean, that encapsulates everything you want to hear. And then he goes to the SOB comments and the ridiculousness of this weekend.
I'd ask everyone this question. If all the players next week decided to stand up and not kneel during the national anthem, and then basically just said, okay, now what? What would people do? What would people say? Would everybody just go on back to business as usual, put their head down like ostriches, and be like, okay, well, that's all good. What
now.
would people do? Would everybody be happy then, or would the conversation advance?
So there are going to be a lot of people that talk into microphones today that probably don't give back to their community, probably aren't truly socially and politically conscious, and probably didn't vote. I personally didn't need Colin Kaepernick to take a knee. I personally didn't need for this situation to take place for me to understand how important this conversation that we're having right now. And the term protest keeps getting used a lot, but a lot of people don't make the distinction of what types of protests can be volatile versus peaceful. A direct action is a boycott or strike. The players aren't doing that. What they're doing is a passive protest. They're quietly taking a knee, and they're doing it when people are watching the most. And that just so happens to be at their place of business and or work, because if they did it in isolation, we wouldn't be talking about it. And also for all of the owners, and I'm going to name them, Robert Kraft, Jerry Jones, Stan Kroenke, Dan Snyder, Shahid Khan, Woody Johnson, Bob McNair, and Ed Glazier, they have their teams looking at them sideways today, because the guy you supported now not only turned his back on you, but he slapped us all in the face and even called us SOBs while doing it. So now it puts everybody in an awkward spot. And to your point about what he tweeted, I affectionately call 45 our commander in tweets. Yeah. We don't need somebody that's leading the free country, sending out tweets at 3 in the morning and 4 in the morning, nicknaming and being divisive. We need leadership at a time when there's so many things happening in our country. And that's what's the more important thing, to your point, that isn't getting discussed.
Absolutely.
As well as the actions by Colin Kaepernick, who is somewhere right now, the leader of the scenario of taking the knee, without a job in the NFL because he did it. So there is a contradiction that's taking place, and if this doesn't happen, we don't have this conversation.
Leadership, huh? Leadership, credibility, competency, positive impact on others.
So there isn't any way in the world that we're going to take problems that date back in our country centuries and solve them in a 4-hour conversation. But if we could each of us, and Jalen, I'll give you the first word here, if we could each of us suggest something in a minute that you think might be a productive step towards addressing some of what we're seeing going on right now, what would it be? What would you like to see happen? Something that is realistic that you would like to see happen as a result of all this.
I would like those who are uncomfortable by the conversation to actually take a deep breath, open their ears, open their heart, and step out of their comfort zone and truly listen to what people are talking about, protesting about, upset about, disappointed about. And also pay attention to the audience that our president continues to endorse. He was in Huntsville, Alabama. And while we're talking about what he said, we should be talking about those that were cheering and clapping what he said. That's what the issue is. Those that continue to retweet and support some of the divisive rhetoric that continues to be spewed. Once we respect one another and acknowledge that there's an issue, that allows us to put each other in a position to get past it. But to turn a blind eye and ignore it is the frustrating part, I'm pretty sure, for everybody involved, in particular those who are protesting.
Quite honestly, Jalen, I think there's some people who they're never going to change their mind, okay? Because this stuff is taught. It is handed down from generation to generation, and you're never going to change that. You just aren't. What can you do when you're talking about social injustices, when you're talking about unfair treatment of minorities when it comes to, minorities being treated differently at traffic stops, law enforcement not being held accountable for not following the letter of the law, those kinds of things that need to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, making sure you're holding people accountable. Those are the kind of things that need to be advanced. Those are the kind of things that need to start changing, and people start needing to see more things happen in such a way that people are being treated fairly. Those are the kind of things that I'm talking about. Like, how can we make sure that those kinds of things start to slow down as far as how people are treated differently? Because when you're talking about people opening their minds and having conversations, look, I mean, that sounds great, and I'm with you. But in my opinion, I don't think sometimes I don't think that's ever going to change.
And I think there are a number of people that won't ever. So those aren't the ones we're dealing with.
Right.
We're dealing with the ones, and I agree with you, Jalen, where I look at that and I say, man, I hate what they're doing. Deep breath, count to 10, whatever, and say, but let me listen. I may still not agree, but let me listen. Let me ask you both this quick since we're not out of time. I asked this to Booger. If Colin Kaepernick was on a team this year, and remember he said if he's playing, he wasn't going to kneel anymore. He was standing for the national anthem. If he was on a team this year and he stood for that first national anthem, do you think players would still be kneeling and sitting, as many that are now? Or once they saw him standing, do you think that they would stand as well?
I think players would still kneel because you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. And while he was the initial person to set it off, I still think that there will be players doing it regardless to whether he chose to participate or not.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with him.
Do you think some would stop doing it because he would stand?
You know what? I think right now there may be some who stop doing it because I think, Mike, that there are people now who feel as though the conversation is out there now. Right. Now we've kind of really got the ball rolling. Right. People are listening now, but it would be interesting to see. I think some players. Look, I mean, not all players are kneeling. Right. Not all. I mean, it's funny because, again, I really do think, though, that we need to get past this issue about the form of protest. And I think players really want to. I know I want to. I think if you really care about what's going on and what is at the crux of this issue, you'll stop talking about the methodology, the form of protest, and you'll start talking about the issues. And you'll start talking about how can we make it better? How can we make equality be the norm instead of inequality that the people are talking about right now?
And with the reaction that the owners, inclusive of most of those who contributed to Donald Trump's campaign, and Jalen read the names earlier this morning, with their reactions, does this in any way change your perspective as to whether or not Colin Kaepernick will ever get back into the NFL?
Look, I think at the end of the day, it's going to be tough for him. I think that there's going to be people who, no matter what, will look at this and will try and make a business decision. Even if they have been swayed a little bit differently, even if they're looking at this thing a little bit differently, even if they're going, hey, maybe we made a little bit of a mistake here, and we'd like to try and walk it back. I really think at the end of the day, business is what's going to rule, and I think Colin's going to sit. I think the likelihood of Colin sitting is much more than him getting the job. Serious conversation today, but I want to end it on a light note. Jalen Rose has said, and he's made the prediction, that LeBron James will finish his career in Cleveland. Way to go, Jalen. That's what I got. Really Michigan guy, huh?
Guys, thank you both for being a part of this. Thank you, everybody, for your contribution all morning long. We'll see you tomorrow. Mike and Mike.